This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, President Abdelmajid Tebboune has extended his condolences to the families of the victims who died in the crash of a military helicopter near Al-Mnia airport as the opening of an investigation has been ordered to inquire about the causes and circumstances of the crash. President Abdelmajid Tebboune has said that Algeria will work with responsibility and commitment during its rotating presidency of the African Peer Review Mechanism to enable it to achieve peace and stability in Africa. Today, Algeria and Tunisia are celebrating the 66th anniversary of the painful Sayyid Sidi Youssef massacre committed by the then French colonial air force on the 8th of February 1958. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned of a possible Israeli ground assault on Rafah in the south of the Gaza Strip on the border with Egypt, where hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians are crowded. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Smani. Starting today's news, the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has extended his condolences to the families of the martyrs who died in the crash of a military helicopter near Al-Mnia airport. Colonel Amara Rida, Lieutenant Colonel Jalal Yassin and Contractor Sergeant Belgarbi Mohammed died yesterday night when a military helicopter belonging to the Wurgla Air Base crashed. The President of the Republic expressed his sincerest condolences and feelings of sympathy to the families and to all members of the People's National Army, praying Allah Almighty to cover the martyrs with His vast mercy and accept them in His vast paradise. According to a statement issued by the Ministry of National Defense, said during a planned night training flight, a military combat helicopter of the type Mi-171 combat helicopter belonging to the Air Force Command crashed near the airport of Al-Mnia in the 4th Military Region. The statement added that in this sorrowful ordeal, the Army General presented on his behalf and on behalf of all the personnel of the National People's Army his sincere condolences and deepest sympathy to the families of the martyrs of this tragic incident. Army General Said Shingriha, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, has ordered the opening of an investigation to inquire about the causes and circumstances of the crash. Now, as you followed in our top stories, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has said that Algeria will work with responsibility and commitment during its rotating presidency of the African Peer Review Mechanism to enable the mechanism to make an effective contribution to continental action to achieve peace and stability and complete the process of decolonization in Africa. The details in this report by Mohamed Khatel.
During a meeting held via video conference, the President of the Republic, who took over the rotating presidency of the Forum of Heads of State and Government of the African Peer Review Mechanism, APRM, specified in an address that this meeting was taking place less than 2 months after the celebration of the 20th anniversary of the creation of the APRM, and that it is our duty on this occasion to pay tribute to the founders of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, NIPAD. Algeria has always believed in the values, principles and objectives of this African mechanism and continues to have faith in its capacity to work to anchor them in the political, economic and social structure of our continent, the President of the Republic maintained. He added that this mechanism will remain unique in its kind for the action of regional organizations in that it represents for us a space for dialogue and exchange of views, ideas and analysis, and a safe space in which we can consult and help each other to find solutions to the challenges facing our states, our regions, and our continent in general. I am convinced that this mechanism created in Africa and for Africa will help us to find effective solutions to our common challenges and to share best practices, experiences and expertise in the area of good governance at both regional and continental levels, stated the President of the Republic. He added, "In view of this noble role, I accept with pride, pleasure and determination the leadership of the African peer review mechanism for the next 2 years, confident that I can count on the support and backing of my predecessors and my fellow presidents of the member states. Of course, I look forward to working and coordinating with my brothers Julius Maaba Bayo and Yoweri Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, a brotherly country, within the framework of the Troika, with a view to realizing the ambitions and aspirations of our states and peoples for security, prosperity and stability, far from the economic and political crises, particularly those caused by unconstitutional changes of government," continued the President of the Republic. He also pledged to extend with strength and commitment the achievements and gains made, stressing that Algeria, one of the founding states of the peer review mechanism, is convinced of the need to broaden the mandate and missions of this mechanism to include the review and assessment of the 2063 African Agenda and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, with a view to achieving the objectives of development and good governance in Africa. To this end, during its rotating presidency, Algeria will work alongside its peers with a high sense of responsibility, abnegation and commitment to enable the African peer review mechanism to make an effective contribution to African continental action initiated by the founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity, or African Union, with a view to achieving peace, stability and prosperity and completing the process of decolonization on our beloved African continent, the President of the Republic assured.
ستبقى آليتنا هذه فريدة من نوعها بالنسبة لعمل المنظمات الإقليمية من منطلق أنها تمثل بالنسبة لنا فضاء رحبا للحوار وتبادل الرؤى والأفكار والتحاليل ومساحة آمنة نستطيع من خلالها أن نستعين ببعضنا البعض لتقديم المشورة والتأييد والدعم لإيجاد الحلول للتحديات التي تواجهنا دولا وأقاليم وقارة.
In this connection, President Tebboune expressed his aspiration as part of the collective action to pursue all renewal processes aimed at promoting the positive transformation of the African mechanisms across the continent, to make them a means of strengthening unity, self-determination, freedom, progress and the collective well-being of all the children of Africa.
ستسعى الجزائر مع أقرانها خلال توليها الرئاسة الدورية بأقصى قدر من روح المسؤولية والتضحية والالتزام حتى تتمكن الآلية الإفريقية للتقييم من قبل النظراء من المساهمة بشكل فعال في العمل القاري الإفريقي الذي بدأه الآباء المؤسسون لمنظمة الوحدة الإفريقية الاتحاد الإفريقي حاليا من أجل تحقيق السلم والسلام والاستقرار والازدهار واستكمال مسار إنهاء الاستعمار في ربوع قارتنا الإفريقية الغالية.
The President of the Republic went on to say that the issues and points discussed at the summit clearly reflect continuity combined with change for the better, as evidenced by the country evaluation reports, which must be taken into consideration, as well as the targeted evaluations examined and debated during this session.
Now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has received the Secretary General of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum, Mohamed Hamel, at the ministry's headquarters. Mohamed Hamel is visiting Algeria as part of the preparations for the 7th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum, scheduled to take place in Algiers from the 29th of February to the 2nd of March. The Chief of Staff of National People's Army, Army General Saad Shingri, has continued his official visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as the representative of the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, by visiting 2 Saudi companies. The visit began at the Semi Advanced Electronics Company, where the Army General visited the company's various workshops and was given a full explanation of its various products, mainly in the fields of communication systems, energy, information, and cybersecurity. The Army General was given a comprehensive presentation on the company and its development plans, says the press release, noting that symbolic gifts were exchanged at the end of the visit. For the 125th day, the Zionist occupation forces continue their savage aggression started on the 7th of October 2023 against the besieged Gaza Strip by land, sea, and air, so far killing 27,708 Palestinian civilians, most of them women and children, and injuring about 67,147 others, while more than 8,000 people are still missing under the rubble and on the roads. More with Said Bougazi.
The occupation warplanes bombed homes in various neighborhoods of Gaza City, specifically in the neighborhoods of El Rimal, Sabra, and El Zaytun, killing dozens as others sustained various injuries. The occupation artillery also fired shells at El Rimal and El Sabra neighborhoods in Gaza City. A number of citizens were killed and others were injured after being targeted by Israeli drones in the alleys and streets of the western region of Gaza City, specifically in the University Square, the Industrial, Aviation, and Saraya intersection. Sources said that some of them are still lying in the place where the army prevents ambulances from reaching them to transport them to hospitals. Explosions and gunfire were also heard in As-Sabra, El-Rimal, and Tel El-Hawa neighborhoods in Gaza City, resulting from the occupation army targeting a number of homes in the vicinity of the place. The bodies of 14 slain citizens, including 5 children and dozens of injuries, were recovered after the occupation warplanes bombed 2 homes owned by Farjan and El Mughir families in Tel El-Sultan and Al-Saudi neighborhoods west of the city of Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip. Nafed Abdel Jawad, a journalist working for Palestine TV, and his son were killed in a Zionist missile strike that targeted a house in the city of Deir el-Balah in the central Gaza Strip. The occupation warplanes intensely and violently bombed various neighborhoods of the city of Khan Yunis, south of the Gaza Strip, and the occupation artillery fired dozens of rocket shells at the eastern areas of the city. Occupation warplanes also targeted the border area south of the city of Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip. The occupation artillery fired dozens of rocket shells at the eastern areas of the city of Khan Yunis, south of the Gaza Strip.
The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said that the failure of the international community is now not limited solely to its inability to put an end to the genocidal Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip, but also includes its inability to force the occupier to lift the restrictions imposed on citizens in the occupied West Bank. In a statement relayed by the Wafa news agency, the Palestinian diplomacy said that the Zionist entity's relentless war on the Palestinian people is not limited to military aggression, but also to its deliberate desire to transform Gaza, the West Bank, and East al-Quds into unlivable places. In this connection, the ministry recalled that the occupation imposed a long series of collective punishments on all defenseless Palestinian civilians, citing collective executions, the demolition of homes, the seizure of land, the construction of new settlements, and the installation of hundreds of fixed and mobile checkpoints on the main roads and at the entrances to every town, village, and camp. Around 3,000 homes have been burned down by the Zionist entity during its aggression against the Gaza Strip, with losses estimated at several tens of millions of dollars, the Palestinian Enclave's media office has reported. According to a statement from the office, the losses caused by the burning of houses and residential units belonging to Palestinians by the Israeli occupation army are estimated to be in the tens of millions of dollars, and most of these residential units were in the Gaza Strip and in the northern governorates. Meanwhile, United Nations Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Westland, told journalists on the situation in Gaza that the agreement on the lasting ceasefire would be incredibly difficult to set up.
My humanitarian coordinator, Jamie McGoldrick, is there now for the 5th time in 5 weeks. What he's trying to do is to set up some key priorities for humanitarian delivery as for the time we will have a humanitarian ceasefire. At the moment, as the hostilities are ongoing, it is impossible for the UN system to deliver sufficiently and most effectively on the ground. To that, it is too busy, and we can actually not, at the moment, easily access the north of Gaza, given the conflict as it is. So that conflict needs a pause quickly. But I can tell you that this agreement on a lasting ceasefire will be incredibly difficult to set up, because we will have to go into details of names and kind of arrangements that are not a quick fix whatsoever. So even if the framework is in place, the details need to be very carefully worked out.
He called for a political solution to the humanitarian nightmare, as he put it, stressing that a structure is needed so that the Palestinians will govern all Palestine.
Coming from meetings in the region and with the Palestinian president, to see how we get from where we are in the midst of a humanitarian nightmare and a total conflicted West Bank into a different course, and we need to set that course not by humanitarian means but by politics. I think there is a much more clear understanding and a process and a dynamic in the region that works on political issues, whether that is what comes after the ceasefire, how to keep a ceasefire going and not stopping, and also how to set up a system on the ground that can allow for a governance structure in Palestine that is strong enough to be in the midst of the day after discussions and in the midst of the day after cooperation with the international community. It is important because if that structure is not in place in a credible way, it would be the first time since the Oslo Agreement was signed that a part of Palestine would not be ruled by the Palestinians, even under occupation.
That was United Nations Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Westland. Palestinian Minister of Health May Al-Khalayl has sent an urgent letter to the United Nations office to be delivered to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, demanding the protection of medical staff in Palestine. The letter included the testimonies of attacks carried out by the Israeli occupation against medical staff in hospitals. This came during a sit-in organized by the ministry and the Palestinian health sector today in front of the UN headquarters in Ramallah to demand the protection of medical personnel in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The Minister of Health said 340 doctors and health workers were killed and 900 others were injured in the ongoing aggression on the Gaza Strip. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has said that the world has entered an era of chaos, deploring the unprecedented divisions in the Security Council, unable to act in the face of the terrible conflicts that are multiplying.
Governments are ignoring and undermining the very tenets of multilateralism with zero accountability. The United Nations Security Council, the primary platform for questions of global peace, is deadlocked by geopolitical fissures. This is not the first time the Council has been divided, but it is the worst. Today's dysfunction is deeper and more dangerous. During the Cold War, well-established mechanisms helped manage superpower relations. In today's multipolar world, such mechanisms are missing, and so our world is entering in an age of chaos. And we are seeing the result, a dangerous, unpredictable free-for-all with total impunity. On the other way, after decades of nuclear disarmament, states are competing to make their nuclear arsenals faster, stealthier, and more accurate. New potential domains of conflict and weapons of war are being developed without guardrails, creating new ways to kill each other and for humanity to annihilate itself. As conflicts proliferate, global humanitarian needs are at an all-time high, but funding is not keeping pace.
Focusing specifically on the Israeli aggression against Palestine, he warned of a possible Israeli ground assault on Rafah in the south of the Gaza Strip on the border with Egypt, where hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians are crowded.
The situation in Gaza is a festering wound on our collective conscience that threatens the entire region. Israeli military operations have resulted in destruction and death in Gaza at a scale and speed without parallel since I became Secretary General. And I'm especially alarmed by reports that the Israeli military intends to focus next on Rafah, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been squeezed in a desperate search for safety. Such an action would exponentially increase what is already a humanitarian nightmare with untold regional consequences. It's time for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, and this must rapidly lead to irreversible actions towards a two-state solution based on United Nations resolutions, international law, and previous agreement.
In the occupied Palestinian West Bank, the Israeli aggression is going on unabated against the populations of the Palestinian cities, towns and villages, killing and injuring civilians and causing widespread destruction. In the city of El Khalil, south of the West Bank, occupation forces blew up at dawn today the house of the slain Palestinian youth Hassan Kafisha. More on the latest developments in this occupied Palestinian territory with our colleague Mohammed Khatel.
A WEFA correspondent said that large forces from the Zionist occupation army stormed the city of Al Khalil from the northern side and deployed heavily in Bir al-Mahjar area and the university neighborhood, imposed a military cordon in the area, closed the main roads and prevented the movement of citizens, and surrounded the house of Qafisha, which is an apartment in the third floor in a residential building made up of several floors. The occupation soldiers forced the residents of that building and neighborhood buildings to leave their homes and prevented them from taking their belongings or moving their vehicles from the vicinity of the building before they blew up the house, causing damage to the apartments and neighboring buildings. It is worth noting that Qafisha was killed by occupation bullets at a checkpoint west of Beit Jala in Bethlehem Governorate on November 16. Abdul Qadir and Nasr al-Qawasmi were also killed along. The occupation forces raided the homes of the three slain youths on December 30th, notified their families of the decision to demolish their homes, and on January 21st they demolished the home of Al-Qawasimi. In another development, a Palestinian youth succumbed this morning to the wounds he sustained from Zionist occupation forces gunfire, sources said. They said that Muhammad Khalil Barghouti from the town of Qafr Ain, northwest of Ramallah, died as a result of his injuries. In the Nur Shams refugee camp in Tulkaram in the northern occupied West Bank, 2 Palestinians were killed last night by occupation forces, according to the Ministry of Health. The ministry identified the 2 youths as Ziyad Ali Dama, 39, and Islam Ibrahim Al-Ali, 36. According to a WEFA correspondent, occupation forces cordoned off the home of the Al-Ali family in the middle of the camp after sending military reinforcements and bulldozers to the area. Forces shelled the house using Anerga missiles, causing fire to break out on the top floor as bulldozers proceeded to demolish and destroy other parts of the house. Following their withdrawal, the ambulance crews managed to evacuate the bodies of the 2 youths who were killed by the occupation forces inside the targeted house.
Today, Algeria and Tunisia are celebrating the 66th anniversary of the painful Sarid Sidi Youssef massacre committed by the then French colonial air force on the 8th of February 1958. This event illustrates the depth of the relations of brotherhood and solidarity between the Algerian and Tunisian peoples. Now I invite you to know more about those massacres in this program with Asya Bikar.
In February 1958, Tunisia hadn't yet celebrated its second independence and hadn't enjoyed its Liberty Day when Tunisians cuddled their Algerian brothers who longed for their freedom and independence from the then French colonizers, mainly when the Algerian liberation movement was at its peak. Tunisia wasn't only a refuge for the Algerian civilians, but also for freedom fighters. It was a safe base for them. It's a place from where they started several fighting operations directed towards the colonizers. El-Kef area played big role in that. This fact angered the colonizers' authority in Algeria, and it displeased the extreme French political right. Saturday, February 8th was a market or souk day in Saqiet Sidi Youssef village. The French colonizers knew this very well when they chose that day to bomb the quiet village. A large number of Algerian refugees happened to come to the village to receive donations from the Tunisian Red Crescent and from the International Red Cross. All these armless civilians were surprised greatly when around 11 o'clock a large number of bombers started their horrible air raid. The air raid targeted the delegation center, primary school and some public buildings and hundreds of houses. The bombers chased even the armless running civilians. The air raid lasted about 1 hour, leaving the village in derelict state. 68 people died, among whom 12 children, most of them were from the school, 9 women and a custom officer. The number of wounded was 87. The material losses were varied: 5 civilian cars, among which were Tunisian Red Crescent and International Red Cross ones. Some public buildings like the delegation, National Guard Center, customary house, post office, primary school, forestry administration and mining administration were destroyed. In addition to that, 43 shops and 97 houses. The delegate of the Red Cross Halfman was in Saqiet Sidi Youssef while the bombing was taking place. He arrived with his assistants at about 10 o'clock to give the food supplies and other necessities to Algerian refugees. He was then visiting the refugees camp with the delegate when the bombing started. He then declared that he witnessed the French bombers that raided Saqiet Sidi Youssef and damaged. It had also crushed the Red Cross lorries. 3 of them belonged to the Swiss Red Cross and 1 to the Tunisian Red Crescent. All of them were full of clothes for donation. The world newspapers criticized that offense. The world communities considered France as responsible for that horrible crime. Saqiet Sidi Youssef becomes a new stimulus for Tunisian and Algerian national movements. It also centered the Maghrebian foundation of these movements. In addition, they supported the international opinion that accused all forms of colonization that France practiced in North Africa. It was the beginning of the end. The world started to influence France internally and externally and force it to solve what remained in North Africa. The Saqiet Sidi Youssef became then not only a historical event that characterized the common North African struggle, but also formed the active historical point in Tunisian and Algerian contemporary history. So it was not strange if the starting movement for military complete evacuation of soldiers from Tunisia took place after the events of Saqiet Sidi Youssef. The confrontation between Tunisian people and the French colonizers continued until then. The people obliged them to leave Tunisia completely. It was also normal if the armed struggle inside Algeria took another way, starting from 1958 until the independence of Algeria in 1962, after being oppressed by the most horrible colonizers that an Arab country had ever known for 130 years.